continue to follow through on it, as well as try and give you that plea as it happens. Now, the country's biggest tax talk shop is underway in Ekurhuleni. The South African Institute of Taxation is hosting its 12th Annual Tax Indaba to unpack everything from global tax trends post-Trump to local reforms, just as questions swirl around leadership at the South African Revenue Service. Ntokozo Khumalo is there and joins us now for an update. Ntokozo, with news over the weekend that the Revenue Services Commissioner, Edward Keitumetse, will be stepping down early next year. I mean, the hope and the expectation would still be that he would feature in some of the gatherings. Would that be today?
Good morning, Arabilewa. We have the Deputy Commissioner who will be with us today. And of course, the Revenue Service did confirm to us that Edward Keitumetse will be stepping down at the end of April, but that's of course as his contract comes to an end. And I'm sure the Deputy Commissioner Makubu will touch on sort of the succession planning around that as they count down to then Keitumetse stepping down. And that was after President Cyril Ramaphosa extended his contract. But to give us a little bit more on what is expected from this year's tax indaba is Keitumetse Sesana, who is with SAIT. As always, thank you so much for talking to us. A lot on the go, and I suppose the tax industry starting its own national dialogue, which is due to kick off later on in the week. Talk us through domestically the huge issues, of course, around debt. Globally, it's the issue around tariffs and how it affects taxation. Talk us through some of the key topics that will be discussed here today.
It's always a pleasure to chat to you, Ntokozo. So as we know, this year has been a critical year in terms of fiscal policy. We had Budget 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Things that have never happened before have started happening this year. And this specific dialogue is going to be unpacking the pertinent topic of navigating South Africa's spending debt tax trip. Where do we go to from here? The common sentiment around the country is that South Africa is taxing its way to growth. Can we continue doing that? Is that sustainable? And that is the reason why we'll be having this poignant dialogue today as the South African Institute of Taxation. This is the 12th install of the Tax Indaba, but it's very, very poignant and well posed, especially in today's climate. Some of the topics that we're looking at bringing together here, as you touched on, is global topics. So the effects of BEPS 2.0, the global minimum tax. We saw the president of the US, rescinding that executive order. What does that mean for the rest of the world that has signed on to BEPS 2.0. We're also looking at the tariffs, the effect of the tariffs on the South African market. What does that mean for Africa? How do we mobilize domestic resources? And then, of course, coming to South Africa, we know that National Treasury will also be releasing their bills later on this week. So what effect of taxation are we going to be seeing? Will we be seeing new types of tax? Are they going to be looking at the low-hanging fruits? So we'll be bringing together, across the board, academics, policymakers, people in revenue at SARS, so we can discuss this in an open and constructive way. Where do we go to from here as South Africa?
And the industry certainly has its work cut out. Keitumetse, a target for the Revenue Service to collect over 2.006 trillion. That is net. That's after refunds are paid out. It is in a climate of uncertainty, both domestically and globally. Going into that and, touching on taxing our way to growth, that those U.S. tariffs expected to slash our growth even further. What kind of conversations is the industry then having around just navigating those headwinds, but also meeting that mandate of ensuring that you do assist SARS collect the revenue that is needed to see the growth that we require?
And thank you for that hook. So that's exactly what we're looking to open up the conversation to. We've previously been raising taxes. There have been talks about a wealth tax. We know the fuel levies that haven't been touched for 5 years were now tinkered with in order for the government to get that revenue. But we're now trying to see how we can collect the money that's already in the fiscus so that we don't have to increase taxes and further burden, taxpayers that are already going through quite difficult financial times. That 2.006 trillion is quite a high estimate, and we know that the commissioner, unfortunately, he will be stepping down. We've had very good relationships with him, but the trajectory that SARS has been maintaining over the years sees them set to meet that target. They will in fact meet it, but it should not be at the expense of increasing taxes, taxing our way to growth. There has to be other sort of infrastructure development or other means of raising revenue. And that's why conversations such as these at the South African Institute of Taxation, Tax Indaba, will bring about those ideas. What can we do? What we appreciate about the specific forum is that it's not only the policymakers that sit behind their desks, in Woodmead or in Brooklyn or in Pretoria. We have tax practitioners that are on the ground, Keitumetse Sesana Inc., who is here, who sees certain things that the government may not be seeing and who will give them those specific ideas.
And I think that was my next point, because looking at the national dialogue, it is meant to be driven by the public, ensuring that South African citizens are involved in this chat. And I'm sure every South African that pays tax has some contribution to make in these discussions. So how average South Africans can also be part of these kind of conversations.
So, in fact, being here is a critical step. We know even at the budget processes, the government does invite, the public to give budget tips. We know that the minister announces some of those tips, even takes them into consideration. But this sort of dialogue is here to press on that. So the policymakers can hear that the country that we all live in, and we all want to exist in this ecosystem called tax. We want tax to work for us, paying the right amount of tax, get the right amount of services. It's important that we give those ideas, and we trust that the policymakers in the room will hear and take heed.
Yeah, as always, let me let you get to it. The program is due to start, Arabile, at 9 o'clock, where we will then hear from the SARS Deputy Commissioner, who will be here then, of course, representing the office, unpacking some of those issues that Keitumetse just highlighted now around the debt crisis, but also, the future of taxation post the Trump administration, and that's some of those global issues as well, Arabile. So we will update a little bit later on. We are looking to speak to the Deputy Minister as well as Deputy Commissioner and some of the tax practitioners who have a clearer understanding of what citizens on the ground are looking for when it comes to South Africa's tax regime and how to drive out growth and be more efficient with tax collection in the country with all the various economic factors, Arabile. So I will be back a little bit later on with those details.
Yeah, and also it would be very interesting to also get a sense of the kind of leader the South African Tax Institute would be very happy with having, of course, following the departure of Edward Keitumetse as commissioner as well, because that kind of matters, including the relationship, of course, with the finance or treasury, as it were, as well. So many aspects to unpack here. Thank you so much for bringing that for us then out of Ekurhuleni in Ntokozo Khumalo following that Tax Indaba. Diversity founder Terry Oakley-Smith has joined calls for Keitumetse